On a cold, rainy night, a millionaire arrives at his mansion and finds a sight that paralyzes him. A 6-year-old girl is unconscious at his front door, shivering with fever while holding a wet letter. When he decides to read the letter, his hands begin to tremble and he calls emergency immediately, discovering that those pages reveal a secret about his past that he never imagined possible. The rain hammered mercilessly against the windshield of the black Bentley, creating a hypnotic rhythm that echoed Edward Morgan's turbulent thoughts. His hands, usually steady during the most tense negotiations, trembled slightly as he gripped the steering wheel. The business dinner had been an absolute success. Another company acquired, more employees who would lose their jobs tomorrow, more profit for his already overflowing coffers. At 42, Edward had built a business empire that few dared to challenge. Known in corporate circles as the Iceman, he had turned calculated coldness into his greatest weapon. Every decision was measured by its profit potential, every relationship assessed for its strategic utility. There was no room for sentimentality in his meticulously planned life. The electronic gate of his mansion whirred open smoothly, revealing the bluestone paver driveway that led to the main entrance. The 5,000-square-foot property was his fortress, a tangible symbol of his success. Perfectly manicured lawns, ornamental fountains, and imposing architecture declared to the world that Edward Morgan had made it in life. But something was different tonight. A small, dark shape was huddled by the main door, almost imperceptible in the gloom cast by the garden lights. Edward frowned, irritated. Probably some injured animal that had sought shelter from the storm. Or perhaps a homeless person who had managed to bypass the security system. He approached slowly, his footsteps echoing on the wet marble. The rain continued relentlessly, soaking his $3,000 Italian suit. When he finally made out the shape clearly, his heart stopped. For an instant that felt like an eternity. It was a child, a girl, approximately 6 years old, with brown hair plastered to her face by rain and fever. Her small, thin body trembled violently, not just from the cold, but from something far more alarming. Even unconscious, she clutched a crumpled, wet letter to her chest. Edward froze. Throughout his adult life, he had avoided children as if they carried some contagious disease. They represented everything he despised: unpredictability, emotional responsibility, unnecessary expenses. He had publicly stated on several occasions that he would never have children. "Children are obstacles to success," he used to say with absolute conviction. But there, before that small, defenseless figure, something inexplicable happened. A strange, uncomfortable sensation stirred in his chest, as if a wall of ice had begun to crack after decades frozen solid. His hands, which signed multi-million-dollar contracts without hesitation, trembled as they reached for the child. The girl was burning with fever. Her breathing was shallow and irregular, and small moans escaped her chapped lips. Edward noticed that her clothes, though clean, were visibly cheap and already soaked through. Her worn-out little shoes revealed socks with small holes. Without fully understanding his own actions, Edward lifted her into his arms. She weighed almost nothing, like a broken bird. Her small, fragile body contrasted drastically with the solidity of his own physique. The letter remained firmly clutched in her tiny hand, as if it were her most precious possession. Inside the mansion, motion sensor lights flickered on, revealing the opulence that defined his life. Imported marble, valuable works of art, designer, furniture, all meticulously chosen to impress and intimidate. But none of it mattered now. Only this unknown child who had appeared on his doorstep like an urgent, disturbing mystery. Edward gently placed the girl on the Italian leather sofa, covered her with his own jacket, and with still trembling hands began to carefully open the wet letter. The first words he managed to decipher made his blood run cold. What was written on those pages would change his life forever. The words danced before Edward's eyes, blurred by rainwater and the tears that had been shed on the paper. With extreme care, he tried to decipher the shaky, smudged handwriting. The first line he managed to read completely hit him like a punch to the gut. "Edward, this is Sophia, your daughter." His hands trembled more violently as he held the letter. This had to be a cruel prank, an elaborate blackmail attempt by some corporate enemy. He had never had children. He would never allow that to happen. His life was perfectly controlled, with no room for surprises or emotional responsibilities. He looked at the girl asleep on the sofa. Even with her pale face and disheveled hair, there was something vaguely familiar in her delicate features, the shape of her eyes, the line of her jaw. Edward shook his head vigorously, pushing away absurd thoughts. Coincidences happened. He continued reading, forcing himself to decipher each blurred word. "I know you never wanted to be a father, that you declared it publicly when you shut down our company 6 years ago. But I need you to know Sophia has a rare congenital heart condition. If she faints, every second counts. Please don't abandon her like you abandoned me." The name of the company mentioned in the letter made Edward recoil instinctively. Hope Textiles. He remembered that acquisition perfectly. A small children's clothing factory he had bought solely to gain access to the valuable land it sat on. He had fired all the employees in a single afternoon, without warning, without severance beyond the legal minimum. It had been one of the most profitable transactions of that year, but he couldn't remember the faces of the employees. To him, they were just numbers on spreadsheets, costs to be eliminated. He had never cared about their personal stories or the impact his decisions had on their lives. It was business, just business. The child moaned softly, drawing his attention back to the urgent reality. Her breathing was even more irregular, and small beads of sweat mixed with rainwater on her face. Edward touched her forehead and recoiled immediately. The fever was dangerously high. He picked up the phone without hesitation and dialed 911. His voice, normally firm and authoritative, came out shaky. "I need an ambulance urgently. I have a child here, about 6 years old, with a very high fever and a congenital heart condition. She collapsed and..." He stopped, realizing he knew nothing more about the girl's state. While waiting for the ambulance, he returned to the letter. More passages became legible as the paper dried slightly. "I worked at Hope Textiles for 3 years. I was happy there, Edward. I had plans, dreams. You didn't even see me when you came to give your presentation on human resources optimization. I was 2 months pregnant." Edward felt a tightness in his chest. He vaguely remembered that presentation. He had been direct and efficient, as always. He had explained to the employees that the company would be restructured and that some cuts would be necessary. In truth, he knew from the beginning that everyone would be laid off, but strategic lies were part of the corporate game. "My name is Clara Evans. We met at a corporate party 2 years before the closure. We spent a night together, remember? You said I was different from other women, that there was something special about me." Edward frowned, forcing his memory. There had been so many women over the years, so many casual encounters that never meant anything beyond a momentary distraction. But slowly, an image began to form in his mind. Brown hair, bright green eyes, a genuine smile that contrasted with the artificiality of the women in his social circle. Clara. She had worked in the administrative department of one of the companies he frequented. They had talked about literature, about simple dreams she cherished. The ambulance arrived, sirens wailing through the pre-dawn silence. Paramedics stormed the mansion with a professional efficiency that impressed even Edward. In seconds, they were beside the girl, checking her vital signs with equipment that looked like something out of a science fiction movie. The urgency in their movements confirmed what the letter had warned. Every second truly counted. "What's her name?" asked the more experienced paramedic, a middle-aged woman with concerned eyes. "Sophia," Edward replied automatically, surprised at how naturally he pronounced the name. "Sophia Evans." The words left his mouth as if they had a life of their own. "Are you the father?" The direct question struck him like a bolt of lightning. Edward hesitated, looking at the crumpled letter still in his hands. Was he a father? How could he answer that with certainty? Yes, he murmured, deciding that lying at that moment was less important than ensuring the child received proper care. "She has a rare congenital heart condition." The paramedics exchanged significant glances. "That explains the symptoms," said the younger one as he prepared a small gurney. "Irregular pulse, shallow breathing, high fever. We need to take her immediately." Edward accompanied them to the ambulance, still wearing his soaked suit. The rain had lessened, but the cold wind cut through his skin like sharp blades. Inside the vehicle, the strobe lights created a surreal, almost dreamlike atmosphere. Sophia was connected to various machines, her small body nearly swallowed by cables and monitors. Edward sat beside the gurney, not knowing exactly why he had gotten into the ambulance. In other circumstances, he would have sent an employee to handle the situation while he returned to his nightly routine of analyzing financial reports. "She's stabilizing," the paramedic informed him, but her expression remained grave. "Still, we got here just in time. A few more minutes and—" Edward didn't want to hear the end of the sentence. He looked at Sophia, noticing for the first time small details that had gone unnoticed in the dim light of his house. Her hands were delicate as porcelain with neatly trimmed nails. Someone cared for her, loved her enough to tend to these small details. Mercy General Hospital was a private institution where Edward maintained a premium health plan for personal emergencies. His arrival caused a small commotion. It was rare to see him there, especially under such unusual circumstances. The medical team received Sophia with the efficiency typical of those accustomed to serving the city's elite. Dr. Henry Morton, a renowned cardiologist and an acquaintance of Edward's, personally took over the case. "I need a few minutes to fully assess the situation," he explained, after examining Sophia quickly. "You can wait in the VIP lounge." Alone in the elegant waiting room, Edward finally had the opportunity to read the rest of the letter more calmly. The next lines revealed details that disturbed him even more. "I never tried to contact you because you made it very clear that children were unnecessary obstacles to success. I raised Sophia alone, working 3 jobs to make sure she had what she needed." 3 jobs. Edward mentally calculated the typical salaries for jobs a woman without a college degree could get after losing her job at Hope Textiles. The math was grim. Barely enough to live decently, let alone afford specialized medical treatments for a rare heart condition. "I tried to reach out to you several times when we discovered her heart problem, but your lawyers always blocked my attempts. They said you didn't want to be bothered with irrelevant personal matters." Edward vaguely remembered giving those instructions to his legal team years ago. How many people had tried to speak with him? How many stories like Clara's had been summarily ignored? Dr. Morton returned with a serious expression that made Edward's stomach clench. "I need to speak with you urgently." Dr. Henry Morton closed the consultation room door with an expression Edward had learned to recognize in the business world. It was the face of someone who had to deliver difficult news. The doctor, a man in his 50s with graying hair and hands that had been saving lives for decades, sat heavily behind his desk, which was covered in diplomas and certifications. "Edward, I need to be direct with you," he began, adjusting his glasses. "Sophia's condition is extremely serious. She has a rare congenital heart defect called Eisenmenger's syndrome. It's a progressive disease that affects pulmonary circulation." Edward felt as if the air had been sucked out of the room. Medical terms danced in his mind without making complete sense. But Dr. Morton's grave tone communicated everything he needed to know. His supposed daughter was in real danger. "What does that mean exactly?" he asked, his businesslike voice, trying to mask his growing fear. "It means her heart has to work much harder to pump blood. The fainting spells, like the one today, are signs that the condition is worsening. Without proper treatment—" The doctor paused significantly. "Edward, we're talking months, a year at most." The silence that followed was deafening. Edward, accustomed to controlling every aspect of his life, felt completely powerless against an enemy he couldn't buy, intimidate, or overcome with business strategies. Death didn't negotiate. "Is there a treatment?" The question came out more like a desperate whisper than Edward's typical authoritative demand. Dr. Morton consulted some papers on his desk. "There's an experimental surgery being developed in Germany. It's a complex procedure with a success rate of approximately 60%. But Edward—" Another loaded pause. "The cost is prohibitive. We're talking about almost $2 million, including all stages of treatment. $2 million. For Edward, that sum represented the profit of a particularly productive afternoon. He had spent more than that on his last yacht, bought on impulse during a successful negotiation. But now, hearing the number in the context of a child's life, the figure gained a completely different weight. "And if we don't do the surgery?" he asked, though he already knew the answer. "The episodes will become more frequent and intense. She'll gradually lose the ability to do normal childhood activities. Playing, running, even walking will become impossible." Dr. Morton removed his glasses and slowly cleaned them. "Edward, I need to ask, are you really her father?" The question caught him off guard. "Why do you ask?" "Because this specific condition has a strong hereditary component. If you are indeed the father, there's a chance you also carry the gene. It would be important to run some tests." Edward thought of Clara's letter, of the words about a night they spent together, about how she had said he was different. He vaguely remembered a conversation about family, about how Clara dreamed of having children, and how he had been categorical in stating he would never be a father. "Doctor, I need to be honest. I only found out about her existence a few hours ago. The mother, Clara, sent me a letter explaining the situation." Edward showed him the still damp paper. "She mentions DNA test results." Dr. Morton quickly scanned the letter, focusing on the parts he could decipher. "I see. A reference to labs here. Edward, if you want absolute certainty, I can request a new paternity test today. The results will be back in 48 hours. "And how much time do we have to decide on the surgery?" "Ideally, we should start preparatory procedures next week. The longer we wait, the lower the chances of success." Edward looked through the office window, seeing the rain that had finally stopped. Outside, the city was slowly waking up to another day. Millions of people going about their normal routines, unaware that on the 8th floor of that hospital, a man faced the most important decision of his life. A decision that could save a child he didn't even know was truly his daughter. The hospital room was bathed in the soft pre-dawn light when Edward heard the first whisper. He had spent the entire night sitting in the armchair beside the bed, unable to sleep, watching Sophia's small chest rise and fall with the help of medical equipment. The paternity test had been collected a few hours earlier, but the results wouldn't be available until the next day. "Mommy?" The weak, confused voice cut through the silence like a delicate blade. Edward leaned forward, unsure how to react. Sophia opened her eyes slowly, blinking several times to adjust to the soft light coming through the window. When she finally focused her gaze on him, her expression went through a sequence of emotions: confusion, recognition, and surprisingly, a kind of quiet curiosity. "You're the man in the picture," she said, with the disconcerting naturalness of children. "What picture?" Edward asked, moving closer to the bed. "The picture Mommy keeps on her nightstand. She said you're my daddy." Sophia tried to sit up, but the wires and tubes connected to her small body limited her movements. "Is Mommy okay?" She said she had to go to the hospital on the other side of town. The simplicity of the question hit Edward like a punch to the gut. How could he explain to a 6-year-old that her mother was probably dying in a public hospital, while she received VIP treatment in a private institution? How could he justify that he had the resources to save lives, but for years had completely ignored the existence of them both? "Your mom is being cared for by very good doctors," he replied, choosing his words carefully. "She worries a lot about you." Sophia nodded, as if it were the most natural thing in the world. "I know. Mommy always worries about me. That's why she taught me what to do when my heart hurts really bad." She touched her chest with her free hand. "She said if I felt really sick, I should go to the big mansion for help." "Do you knew where I lived?" "Mommy showed me once when we passed by your street on the bus. She said the most important man in the city lived there, and that maybe one day I'd need to meet him." Sophia tilted her head, studying Edward's face. With childlike curiosity, "You look sad." The innocent observation completely disarmed him. Edward, accustomed to maintaining a mask of professional coldness in all situations, didn't know how to respond to a child's brutal honesty. "Maybe I am a little sad," he admitted. "Because of Mommy? Because of a lot of things." Sophia extended her small hand towards him. Instinctively, Edward took it, surprised by its fragility and the warmth it radiated. "Mommy says when we're sad we should think about the good things that are still going to happen." "And what good things do you think will happen?" "Well," Sophia considered the question seriously, as if it were a matter of extreme importance. "I'm going to get better and I'll be able to play in your big garden. Mommy said you have a garden with lots of flowers, and maybe," she lowered her voice conspiratorially, "you can teach me to swim in your pool." Edward felt a strange emotion swell in his chest. For years, his mansion had been merely a status symbol, a place to impress partners and intimidate competitors. He had never imagined anyone could see it as a place of possibilities, of games and joy. "Would you like that?" he asked. "A lot. And I'd also like you to get to know Mommy better. She's the coolest person in the world. She sings to me when I'm scared, tells funny stories, and makes the best chocolate cake in the universe." The nurse entered the room, interrupting the conversation. "How's our little patient feeling?" "Much better," Sophia replied enthusiastically. "This is my daddy. Mommy always said I'd meet him one day." Edward swallowed hard. The ease with which Sophia accepted him as her father contrasted sharply with his own internal confusion. But one thing was becoming increasingly clear. Regardless of the paternity test results, this extraordinary child had already carved out a space in his heart he hadn't known existed. Edward left Sophia in the care of the medical team with a promise to return soon. The information about Clara being hospitalized at the hospital on the other side of town echoed in his mind like a persistent hum. There were at least 5 public hospitals in the metropolitan area, and finding a specific patient without more details would be like looking for a needle in a haystack. But Edward Morgan hadn't built a business empire by giving up in the face of obstacles. He activated his network of contacts with the efficiency of a well-oiled machine. In less than 2 hours, his personal assistants had scoured the records of all public hospitals in the city, looking for a recently admitted Clara Evans. County General Hospital was on the south side, a region Edward knew only through economic reports and market statistics. He had never set foot on that side of the city, where his companies occasionally outsourced services to reduce operational costs. The contrast with Mercy General was shocking. Overcrowded hallways, entire families, camped out on the floor, waiting for care. The unmistakable smell of disinfectant mixed with sweat and anxiety. Edward felt completely out of place in his Italian suit, drawing curious stares and some whispers. "Clara Evans, Ward 7, Bed 15, the receptionist informed him, after consulting an old computer that took an eternity to process the search. The ward was a desolate environment. 20 beds, separated only by thin curtains, where women of different ages fought various illnesses. The air was heavy, laden with suffering and resignation. Edward walked slowly between the beds, looking for a face he recognized. He found Clara in the last bed of the left row. If Sophia hadn't mentioned her name, he would never have recognized her. The vibrant woman he remembered had transformed into a ghostly version of herself. Brown hair, once shiny, now dull and thin, pale skin stretched over prominent bones, green eyes that once sparkled with dreams now looked like clouded glass. "Clara?" His voice came out softer than he intended. She turned her face slowly, and Edward saw the exact moment recognition dawned. A succession of emotions passed through her eyes: surprise, hope, anger, and finally, a profound sadness that hit him like a stab wound. "Edward Morgan," she said, her voice hoarse and weak. "After 6 years, you finally decided to show up." He pulled a plastic chair to the bedside, ignoring the curious glances of the other patients. "Clara, I got your letter. Sophia is at Mercy General being cared for by the best doctors." "Of course she is." A bitter smile curved her chapped lips. "Money solves everything, doesn't it? At least for those who have it." "Why didn't you ever tell me about her?" The question came out more accusatory than Edward intended. Clara laughed, a humorless sound that quickly turned into a dry cough. "Tell you?" "Edward, I tried. I tried so many times I lost count. Your lawyers, your assistants, your secretaries, all with the same answer. Mr. Morgan does not wish to be bothered with irrelevant personal matters." Edward felt the weight of his own words returning like poisoned boomerangs. He vaguely remembered giving those instructions, creating an impenetrable barrier around his personal life. "I was pregnant when you shut down Hope Textiles," Clara continued, her voice gaining strength from the pain. 2 months. I had just found out and was trying to gather the courage to tell you. But then you showed up with your presentation on optimization and restructuring and fired 300 people in one afternoon. "Clara, I didn't know." "You didn't know because you didn't want to know." She propped herself up on her elbows, gathering energy to continue. "You said that day in front of all of us that children were unnecessary obstacles to success, that truly ambitious men didn't let themselves get contaminated by family sentimentality." Edward remembered those words perfectly. At the time, they had just been a strategy to justify the cuts, a way to rationalize the suffering he was causing. "So, I decided to raise Sophia alone," Clara whispered, lying back down. "And you know what? Those were the 6 happiest years of my life. But now she was dying, and Edward finally understood the cruel irony of the situation. Dr. Amanda Fisher, the oncologist responsible for Clara's case, called Edward for a private conversation in the hospital corridor. Her tired eyes carried the weight of someone who had delivered bad news more times than she cared to remember. Edward braced himself mentally for what was to come, but nothing could have prepared him for the brutality of the medical truth. Mr. Morgan, Clara has terminal pancreatic cancer. When she arrived here 3 weeks ago, the disease had already spread to other organs. The doctor consulted a folder full of test results. Under ideal conditions, if she had been diagnosed 2 years ago, we would have had treatment options. But she didn't have access to preventative screenings, Edward completed, instantly understanding the cruel equation of social inequality. Exactly. Clara worked multiple informal jobs. After losing her job 6 years ago, no health insurance, no resources for regular checkups. When the symptoms became unbearable, it was already too late. Edward felt as if he were being crushed by an invisible press. Every word from the doctor was a silent accusation of his past choices. If he hadn't shut down Hope Textiles so ruthlessly, Clara would have kept her job, her health plan, her chances of early detection of the disease that now consumed her. How long does she have? The question came out as a hoarse whisper. Days, maybe a week at most. Edward's world collapsed. Throughout his adult life, he had believed that money and power could solve any problem. But here he was, facing something his fortune couldn't buy. Time. The time Clara wouldn't have to see Sophia grow up, to teach her the lessons only a mother can impart, to be present for the important moments yet to come. He returned to Clara's room with heavy steps. She was awake, looking out the dirty window that overlooked a grey inner courtyard. Noticing his presence, she turned with difficulty. By the look on your face, I imagine you've already spoken with Dr. Fisher, she said with a serenity that surprised him. Clara, Edward couldn't find the right words. All the communication techniques he had learned in the corporate world seemed pathetically inadequate. Edward, I need to tell you something I didn't write in the letter. Her voice was weaker, but there was an urgency in her eyes. Something about Sophia, about us. He pulled the chair closer, preparing for another revelation that could change everything. That night we spent together, 7 years ago. You were different. Remember? We had just left a meeting where you had saved jobs at a small family business. You said you sometimes questioned if you were making the right choices in life. Edward vaguely remembered. There had been moments, rare but real, when he questioned the human cost of his business decisions. Clara had witnessed one of those moments of vulnerability. You told me about your childhood dreams, about how you wanted to build things, help people. You said your grandfather had been a carpenter and that you admired how he created beauty with his own hands. Clara smiled faintly. Sophia was conceived that night, Edward. It wasn't a casual accident. It was the result of who you really are, beneath all that corporate armor. Clara's words struck Edward like lightning. He had buried that more human version of himself so deeply that he had almost forgotten it existed. Sophia inherited that essence of yours, Clara continued. She has your intelligence, but she also has a huge heart. When she grows up, she'll be capable of great things. But she needs you, Edward. Not the ruthless businessman, but the man I met that night. At that moment, Edward made the most important decision of his life. A decision that would change not only his future, but also his understanding of what it truly meant to be wealthy. The envelope with the paternity test results was on Dr. Morton's desk when Edward arrived at the hospital. The next morning, his hands trembled slightly as he held the document that would either confirm or destroy a reality he was already beginning to accept emotionally. During the sleepless night, he had caught himself imagining Sophia playing in his garden, laughing, as she learned to swim in his pool. 9% probability of paternity, Dr. Morton read aloud. Edward, she is definitely your daughter. The words echoed in the room like cathedral bells. Edward closed his eyes, feeling a complex mixture of relief, terror, and a strange sense of completeness. Sophia was his daughter. That extraordinary child who had appeared on his doorstep during the storm was his own flesh and blood. "Doctor, I want to authorize all procedures for the surgery in Germany immediately," he said, his voice regaining its businesslike firmness. "Money is no object." "Edward, I need to be honest with you. Even with unlimited resources, there are logistical complications. The German medical team can only receive us in 3 weeks, and Sophia needs to be in adequate physical condition to withstand the journey and the procedure." 3 weeks. Edward mentally calculated. Clara had at most a week of life, according to Dr. Fisher. Sophia would have to face not only the most important surgery of her life, but also the loss of her mother. How could a 6-year-old cope with so much pain at once? Is there anything we can do to expedite the process? "I've already contacted the clinic in Munich. They're analyzing Sophia's tests and preparing a specialized team. But Edward," Dr. Morton paused significantly, "there's another delicate issue we need to discuss." "What is it?" "Sophia will need intense emotional support. The loss of her mother, combined with the stress of the surgery, could significantly affect her chances of recovery. Children need emotional stability to heal properly." Edward understood instantly. Sophia would need not only financial resources, but something he had never offered anyone: unconditional love and constant emotional presence. He would have to learn to be a father in real time, while facing the most complex medical situation of his life. At that moment, his phone rang. The screen showed the name of Richard Vance, his majority partner and best friend since college. Edward hesitated before answering, sensing the conversation wouldn't be pleasant. "Edward, where the hell are you?" Richard's voice was laden with irritation. "We missed 3 important meetings yesterday, and today you just vanished. Investors are questioning your competence." "Richard, I need to tell you something important. Don't give me excuses. I heard from the assistants you spent the night in hospitals, wasting time on some irrelevant personal situation. Edward, you're losing focus. We have a $50 million merger in progress." The word irrelevant hit Edward like a slap in the face. It was exactly the term he himself used to dismiss issues that didn't involve direct profit. Now, applied to his own daughter's situation, it sounded obscene. "Richard, I found out I have a 6-year-old daughter with a serious heart condition. She needs urgent surgery." The silence on the other end of the line lasted for long seconds. "Edward, are you kidding me? I've never been more serious in my life. My God, this is a PR nightmare. Illegitimate child, medical problems, unnecessary expenses. Edward, you need to hire a public relations firm to contain this scandal before it leaks to the press." Edward felt anger rise in his chest. "It's not a scandal, Richard. It's a child who needs help." "It's the same thing. Edward, you're thinking with your heart, not your head. This will cost millions and could ruin our reputation." At that moment, Edward realized he was seeing Richard and himself clearly for the first time in years. Edward's office had never witnessed such a tense meeting. Richard had called an emergency session of the board, alleging that the president's irrational decisions were jeopardizing the company's interests. Around the polished mahogany table, 8 men in suits awaited explanations. Edward looked at each familiar face, people with whom he had built an empire over 2 decades. Now, for the first time, he saw them as they truly were, men who had become as obsessed with profit as he himself had been, unable to comprehend that some things in life were worth more than money. "Gentlemen," Edward began, maintaining his firm posture. "I want to introduce you to Sophia Morgan Evans, my daughter." A murmur of discomfort rippled through the room. Richard drummed his fingers on the table, clearly irritated by Edward's direct approach. "Edward," interjected Dr. Henry Campbell, the oldest board member, "we understand this is a delicate, personal situation, but we need to discuss the business implications. We're talking about millions in medical expenses, possible media exposure, questions about your stability to lead strategic decisions." "My stability," Edward laughed, a humorless sound. "Gentlemen, I built this company by firing people as if they were numbers on spreadsheets. I closed entire factories without blinking. I destroyed families' dreams to maximize our profits. And you question my stability when I finally decide to do something human? That's precisely why you can't make emotional decisions now." Richard stood up, taking control of the meeting. "Edward, you're clearly shaken. I suggest you take a medical leave while we handle the business." A medical leave? Edward felt anger surge in his chest. "Richard, this company exists because I sacrificed everything for it. My youth, my relationships, my humanity. And now that I've finally found something worth more than money, you want to push me aside." "It's not personal, it's business," Richard repeated the phrase Edward had used hundreds of times over the years. Hearing his own words used against him was like a punch to the gut. Albert Fisher, the CFO, consulted some papers. "Edward, the projected costs for the child's treatment are astronomical. $2 million for the initial surgery, plus rehabilitation costs, ongoing medical follow-up. We're talking about $5 million over the next 2 years. $5 million, Edward repeated, letting the number hang in the air. "Albert, do you remember our bonus last year? It was $8 million. Divided among us 8, each of us took home $1 million as a performance bonus. Now you question $5 million to save my daughter's life." The awkward silence that followed spoke louder than any argument. Edward looked at each man around the table, seeing the reflection of who he himself had been. Human beings who had transformed into money-making machines, unable to recognize value in anything that didn't generate immediate profit. "Gentlemen," Edward stood up slowly, "for 20 years, you were my family. The only family I thought I needed, but a true family doesn't abandon you when you need support the most." "Edward, be rational." Richard tried one last approach. "You can help this child without compromising our company. Create a foundation, make a donation through third parties, maintain emotional distance." "Emotional distance?" Edward laughed again. "Richard, she's my daughter. For the first time in decades, I feel like my life has a real purpose. And you want me to keep my distance?" At that moment, his phone rang. It was Dr. Morton, and his tone of voice indicated urgency. "Edward, you need to come to the hospital immediately. Sophia had a crisis during the night. We're stabilizing her, but—" Edward didn't wait for the end of the sentence. He walked out of the room without looking back, leaving 8 perplexed men watching the door close behind him. For the first time in his career, Edward Morgan had chosen to be a father before being a businessman. Edward arrived at the hospital, running through the corridors as he never had in his life. Sophia's nighttime crisis had been controlled, but Dr. Morton explained that episodes like this would become more frequent as her condition deteriorated. Time was running out faster than anyone had anticipated. "Daddy!" Sophia stretched out her little arms when she saw him enter the room. The word "daddy" sounded like heavenly music to Edward's ears, who was still getting used to the idea of being a father. "How are you feeling, little one?" He approached the bed, noticing she looked paler than the day before. "A little tired, but better now that you're here." Sophia held his hand with surprising strength for such a fragile child. "Daddy, can I ask you a hard question?" Edward nodded, mentally preparing himself for anything. Is Mommy going to die, isn't she? The direct question struck him like lightning. Edward had spent his entire life avoiding emotionally difficult conversations, delegating personal matters to assistants and lawyers. But here was his 6-year-old daughter demonstrating a maturity that left him simultaneously proud and heartbroken. "Sophia," he struggled to find the right words. "Your mother is very sick." "I know," she explained it to me before she asked me to come here. "She said I might have to learn to live without her, but that you would take care of me." Sophia tilted her head, studying Edward's face. "Are you going to take care of me even when I'm not sick anymore?" "Always," Edward replied without hesitation, surprised by the certainty in his own voice. "Sophia, you're the most important thing that has ever happened in my life. More important than your work." The innocent question was like a stab wound. For 40 years, Edward had put work above absolutely everything. Relationships, health, happiness, all had been sacrificed on the altar of business success. "Much more important," he said, and for the first time in decades, he was being completely honest. Sophia smiled, a smile that lit up the entire hospital room. "Mommy said you'd figure that out one day. She always believed you had a big heart, it was. Just hidden under a lot of work." Edward felt tears burn his eyes. Clara had seen something in him that he himself couldn't see, even after years of calculated coldness. "Sophia, would you like to see your mother today?" "Can I? The doctor said she's too weak for visitors." Edward had already made the decision. "I'll arrange a way." 2 hours later, a specially equipped ambulance transported Sophia to County General Hospital. Edward had used all his influence and contacts to organize the meeting, including a mobile medical team to ensure Sophia was safe during the journey. Clara was awake when they arrived, as if she instinctively knew this would be her last meeting with her daughter. Despite her extreme weakness, her eyes shone when she saw Sophia being carefully transferred to a wheelchair beside her bed. "My little princess," Clara whispered, extending a trembling hand to touch her daughter's face. "Hi, Mommy. I'm getting." "You better. Daddy's taking care of me, just like you said he would." Edward watched the interaction between mother and daughter with a lump in his throat. The naturalness with which Sophia called him Daddy, the way Clara smiled hearing it, it was as if the three of them had always been a family, just waiting for the right moment to reunite. "Clara," Edward approached the bed. "I want you to know I'll take care of her forever. Sophia will never want for anything." Clara turned to him with difficulty. "Edward, she doesn't need things. She needs you, the man I met that night, not the businessman the world knows." At that moment, Clara handed Edward a small, worn pink diary. "Everything you missed about her is in here." The pink diary trembled in Edward's hands, as if it were made of fragile crystal. Clara watched him with eyes that mixed hope and profound sadness, while Sophia quietly played with a small teddy bear she had brought from the hospital. "Open it," Clara whispered. "You need to meet your daughter." Edward opened the first page with reverent care. Clara's handwriting, still firm in the early entries, documented every precious moment he had missed. Sophia took her. "First steps today, March 14th. Walked right to the picture of you I keep on the shelf, as if she knew you were important." The following pages were a treasure trove of stolen memories. First words, first tooth, the first time she said Daddy while pointing at the photograph. Edward discovered that Sophia had asked about him from a very young age, and that Clara always answered honestly, "Your daddy is a very busy man, but one day you'll meet." "She always knew about me?" Edward asked, his voice choked. "Always. I never lied to her about you, Edward. I said you were intelligent, determined, but that you had forgotten how to be happy." Clara coughed weakly. "She always said that when she grew up, she'd teach you again." Edward looked at Sophia, who was now coloring a picture with crayons borrowed from a nurse. Even sick, she radiated an inner light that contrasted sharply with the gloomy atmosphere of the public hospital. "Clara, there's something I need to tell you." Edward took a deep breath. "My partners want to remove me from the company. They think I'm making irrational decisions. And are they right?" Clara smiled faintly. "For the first time in years, you're making decisions with your heart. For men like them, that must seem like madness. I could lose everything. The company, the money, the social standing." "Edward," Clara gripped his hand with surprising strength, "you've already lost everything. You lost 6 years of your daughter's life. You lost the chance to be truly happy. You lost the connection to your own humanity. Now you finally have the chance to gain something worthwhile." Sophia approached the bed, showing her drawing. It was a simple picture. 3 people holding hands in front of a big house with many flowers. "It's us 3, she explained with childlike pride. "A family." Edward felt something definitively break inside his chest. For decades, he had believed family was weakness, that emotional ties were obstacles to success. Now, looking at that simple drawing, he understood he had spent his whole life chasing worthless things while ignoring the only thing that truly mattered. "Clara," he said, his voice firm despite the tears, "I promise Sophia will never feel abandoned again. I will learn to be the father she deserves." "I know you will." Clara closed her eyes, seeming to gather her last strength. "Edward, I need to ask you something. When Sophia grows up, tell her about this conversation. Tell her I died happy, knowing you two found each other." "Mommy," Sophia dropped her drawing and held Clara's hand, "aren't you going to get better?" Clara opened her eyes one more time, focusing on her daughter's face with a love that transcended physical pain. "Sweetheart, sometimes people get so sick they can't stay here with us anymore, but the love I feel for you will stay in your heart forever." "And you'll become a star?" Sophia asked, clearly repeating something Clara had explained to her before. "The brightest one of all, and whenever you look up at the sky at night, I'll be there, watching over you." Edward watched mother and daughter say goodbye with a dignity he had never witnessed in any boardroom or business negotiation. That night, Clara Evans closed her eyes for the last time, knowing she had entrusted her daughter to the care of the only man who could love her as she deserved. Clara's funeral was a simple ceremony Edward would never forget. Only he, Sophia, and a few of Clara's former colleagues attended the small municipal cemetery. Edward held his daughter's hand as she said goodbye to her mother with a maturity that broke his heart. "Bye, Mommy. I'll take good care of Daddy for you," Sophia whispered, tossing a white rose onto the casket. The following week, reality hit Edward with full force. Richard had managed to convince the board to vote for his temporary removal from the presidency, citing emotional instability and decisions detrimental to the company's interests. Edward woke up one morning to find his access to corporate systems had been blocked. "It's temporary," Richard explained during a tense call, "just until you resolve this personal situation and get back to normal." "This is my new normal," Edward replied coolly. "Sophia is my daughter and my priority. Then maybe there's no place for you in this company anymore." The threat echoed in Edward's head for days. Without access to corporate resources, he had to use his personal savings to fund Sophia's treatment. The $2 million for the knee surgery in Germany, the follow-up medical costs, the hospital expenses, it all began to rapidly consume his financial reserves. Worse still, Sophia developed unexpected complications. A minor post-operative infection turned into pneumonia, indefinitely postponing the trip to Munich. Dr. Morton explained that her immune system was compromised by the emotional stress of losing her mother. Children need emotional stability to heal, the doctor repeated. Sophia is fighting much more than a heart condition. She's dealing with grief, adjusting to a new life, fear of the unknown. Edward found himself in a situation he had never faced, the real possibility of failure. Throughout his career, he had always found a solution, a plan B, an alternative strategy. But here he was, facing variables he couldn't control, the emotional health of a traumatized child and his own dwindling financial resources. The last straw came when Sophia had a severe crisis during the night. Edward was asleep in a chair beside her hospital bed when the monitor alarms jolted him awake. Nurses rushed into the room, doctors were paged emergently, and for 15 terrifying minutes, Edward thought he would lose his daughter. "Daddy," Sophia whispered when she finally stabilized. "I'm scared." "Scared of what, sweetheart?" "That you'll give up on me too." The confession pierced Edward's heart like a spear. Sophia, at 6 years old, had already internalized abandonment as a real possibility in her life. First, the father she had never known, then the mother who had died, and now she feared he too would leave her. "Sophia, look at me." Edward cupped his daughter's delicate face in his hands. "I will never, ever give up on you, even if I lose everything, even if I run out of money, even if the whole world turns against us. You are my daughter, and I will fight for you until my last breath." "Promise." "I promise on your mother's memory." That pre-dawn morning, alone in the hospital room, Edward made a decision that would change everything. He picked up his phone and made a call he had sworn he would never make. "Richard, it's me. I want to make a deal." The voice on the other end of the line carried barely disguised triumph. "I'm listening. I'm selling my stake in the company, everything. I want out completely." The silence on the other end lasted for long seconds. "Edward, are you sure? We're talking about your entire life's work." "I'm talking about my daughter's life, and she's worth more than any company." For the first time in decades, Edward Morgan was betting everything on a single hand, his love for his daughter. The sale of Edward's stake in the company should have been a straightforward process, but Richard was determined to turn it into a public humiliation. He offered only 40% of the share's true value, citing devaluation due to leadership instability. Edward had no choice but to accept. Sophia needed to travel to Germany in 2 weeks, or she'd lose the window of opportunity for the surgery. But on the day the contract was to be signed, something unexpected happened. Martha Gonzalez, the human resources director who had been with the company for 15 years, asked to speak with Edward privately. Her eyes were red, as if she had been crying recently. "Mr. Morgan, I need to tell you something. For the past 6 months, Richard has been embezzling funds from the company through fictitious contracts. I discovered it by accident, and I should have spoken up sooner, but I was afraid of losing my job." Edward felt his blood run cold. "What? A kind of embezzlement?" "Consulting contracts with shell companies, payments for services never rendered. It's almost $8 million. Martha handed him a folder full of documents. "He used your absence to fast-track these transactions, claiming he had your authorization." Edward quickly examined the papers. His experience in corporate auditing helped him immediately identify the fraudulent scheme. Richard had been even craftier. He'd used Sophia's situation to distract Edward while executing his plan for illicit enrichment. "Martha, why are you telling me this now?" "Because yesterday I heard about your daughter. I heard you lost your position in the company for choosing to care for a sick child." She wiped tears from her eyes. "Mr. Morgan, in all these years working here, I never saw you show compassion. for anyone. But now, seeing how you've changed because of this little girl, it reminded me why I chose to work here in the first place." Edward remained silent, processing the information. Martha continued, "There are other employees who know about the situation. Most are outraged at how Richard is treating you. We'd like to help." Over the next 48 hours, Edward orchestrated the most important operation of his career. Not to make money, but to protect his daughter and reclaim his dignity. With the help of loyal employees, he gathered irrefutable evidence of Richard's corruption. He contacted his connections at the district attorney's office and the IRS, providing a complete dossier of the corporate crimes. The turnaround was spectacular. Richard was arrested red-handed, trying to transfer $2 million to an offshore account. The media extensively covered the scandal, painting Edward not as the ruthless businessman of before, but as the father who almost lost everything for the love of his daughter. Edward Morgan, from ruthless tycoon to devoted dad, was the headline in a leading national business newspaper. Now, Sophia's story touched the hearts of millions of Americans who began to see Edward in a completely different light. With Richard out and the irregularities exposed, the board of directors found themselves forced to reinstate him as president. But Edward had other ideas. During an extraordinary meeting, he presented a proposal that left everyone stunned. "Gentlemen, I want to transform our company into a socially responsible corporation. 50% of the profits will be allocated to children's health programs, scholarships, and support for low-income families." "Edward, this is madness," protested Dr. Henry Campbell. "We'll lose our competitive edge. We'll gain something far more valuable: public respect and a real purpose." Edward showed financial reports. Companies with strong social programs perform better in the long run. It's smart business, not charity. Sophia was recovering quickly from pneumonia, as if the emotional stability of having Edward back in control had accelerated her healing. The surgery in Germany was rescheduled for the following week. "Daddy," she said one sunny afternoon, "are you really going to turn your company into a good company?" "Our company," Edward corrected. "One day all of this will be yours, and I want it to be something you can be proud of." The transformation was just beginning. 5 weeks had passed since that rainy night that changed everything. Edward was in the garden of his mansion, watching Sophia play with 3 children she had met during her hospital treatment. The surgery in Germany had been an absolute success. The German doctors declared she would have a completely normal life with only routine medical follow-ups. "Daddy, can I plant the rose bush here?" Sophia pointed to an empty flower bed near the living room window. "Of course, sweetie. Your mother would have liked to see the flowers from here." Edward had completely transformed his mansion. What was once a cold showroom to impress visitors now pulsed with life. Toys scattered in the rooms, Sophia's drawings taped to the refrigerator, the sound of children's laughter echoing through hallways that were once as silent as mausoleums. The company had also transformed radically. The Sophia Evans Children's Health Initiative had already benefited over 1,000 underprivileged children across the country. Edward discovered that doing good was surprisingly profitable. The company had never had such a positive public image, attracting ethical investors and contracts with international organizations. "Mr. Morgan," Martha approached, carrying a folder of documents. "More applications have come in for the college scholarship program. There are 20 young people from low-income families who want to study medicine." "Approve them all," Edward replied without hesitation. "And Martha, stop calling me Mr. Morgan. We're a family here." Martha smiled. Edward's transformation had inspired changes throughout the company. The corporate environment, once tense and competitive, now breathed collaboration and shared purpose. That afternoon, Edward received an unexpected visitor. Dr. Morton arrived with a proposal that left him genuinely moved. "Edward, I'd like to extend an invitation. We're establishing a research center for pediatric congenital heart defects. It would be an honor if you would accept the position of chairman of the board." "Doctor, I don't have a medical background. You have something more valuable, the experience of a father who understands the desperation and hope these families face. We need someone to humanize our approach." Edward looked at Sophia, who was now teaching one of the visiting children how to care for the rose seedlings. "I accept on one condition. Sophia will be part of the Children's Advisory Council. Children should have a voice in decisions that affect them." As evening fell, after the other children had left, Edward and Sophia sat on the garden swing he had installed especially for her. The wet letter that had almost disintegrated in the rain was now framed in his office, not as a reminder of pain, but as a symbol of a second chance. "Daddy, are you happy now?" Sophia asked, snuggling into his arms. Edward looked around. His garden, once just expensive landscaping, now had messy flower beds where children planted flowers. His house, built to impress, now echoed with laughter and games. His company, which existed only to generate profit, now changed real lives. "You know, sweetie, for 40 years I thought happiness was having a lot of money and power, but I discovered that happiness is having you. And I discovered that having a dad is the best thing in the world," Sophia replied, kissing his cheek. That night, as Sophia slept in her room, the first real bedroom she'd ever had, Edward opened Clara's pink diary and wrote his first entry. "Today, Sophia taught me that planting roses is more important than closing deals. Clara, thank you for giving me the chance to be a father. Our daughter is teaching the whole world that love truly transforms everything." The man who once declared he never wanted children discovered that being a father was the only thing that truly mattered. And some letters arrive exactly when we need them, even if it's almost too late.